with Ron, and then just move around the panel. Just so you know, for the panel, I guess, Ron is the incumbent in this race. Ron and Susan are running for both running for Department 28. Bruce is the only individual running for Department 22. 22, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. But Bruce has been kind enough to join the two of them. That's okay. Thank you, though. So we do have two different races here. That having been said, first question is going to go to Ron. Ron, every other year the RJ sends out its judicial evaluation poll. That's really the only time the public in general has an idea to, a window into how the judges' performances relative to one another as a judiciary. What ideas do you have to either make the process A, more transparent for the public, easier for them to understand what's going on, or B, more accurate, to have more accurate assessments of individuals like yourself or the judiciary as to how they rank amongst one another?
Well, it would be helpful if the RJ would publish the statistics from the judges from each individual department. For instance, the county and the state and the Administrative Office of the Courts, AOC, keeps track of the number of cases that come in, the number of cases resolved, the length of time it takes to resolve cases. They have statistics on just about everything. The number of days in trial, the number of settlement conferences you do, the success rate of your settlement conferences. There are hundreds of statistics. Now they're all published in the yearly the yearly compilation by the Supreme Court, but that is, although it's on the Nevada Supreme Court website, it's not disseminated to the public. At least they'd have to go and get it. And in fact, the RJ would even publish some of those statistics. It would give a much broader version of what's actually going on in the court. That would help greatly. The statistics or the evaluation, the survey that the RJ does isn't a random poll. They know that, but it's obviously a lot cheaper to do that than it is a random poll. So they could get a lot of these statistics. They're public, and they show what the individual judges are doing. That would help. Thank you.
Bruce, improving upon the RJ poll.
Well, quite honestly, first time I've ever been asked this question, and
we like to keep you on your toes.
no, I think I couldn't. I never thought about what Ron said, and I think there is some validity to what he says, because there are, let's face it, there are some judges that work really hard, and I'm talking about district court judges. I'm not going to talk about, and so we can talk about justice of the peace, but I'm a district court judge, judicial race over there, so let's just talk about the district court judges, and whether you want to include family or non-family. Let's just say non-family. Even family. There are some judges that work really hard. There are some judges that do not work really hard, and there's some middle road. And so I think Ron has some validity to that point. The one, on the other hand, there's one statistic that I don't seem to have a great love for, and judges, because they want their statistics to look good in the annual report of the judiciary that's published by the Administrative Office of the Supreme Court, they will bend over backwards. They will do anything to dispose of the case if they possibly can, so their figures look better. So that's one statistic I'm not crazy about, and it certainly couldn't hurt. The more the voters are informed, the better. Our voters, I'm sorry, had a great opportunity in 2010 to vote for judges to run for retention. They didn't do it because they felt that their opportunity to elect judges was taken away from them. It wasn't the case. So let's face it, a lot of times we're going to have 52 district court judicial races, 7 justice of the court races, and the top of the ticket. I mean, this is a non-presidential race. You got a primary coming up. The voter turnout's probably going to be 15 to 18%, and so the more educated voters can be, the better. But that's kind of my response.
Susan.
Well, that's just one tool, the RJ Review Survey, to look at how judges are performing. I think using that tool, the RJ devote more time if the readers are interested in expanding on what their survey says, looking at the number of appeals filed by a judge and the number of appeals that are overturned by the Supreme Court and remanded back, the number of writ of habeas corpuses that are filed against a judge, both civil and criminal, and also the number of peremptory challenges a judge has filed, and which means that the litigants are filing saying, I want another judge besides this judge. The other thing is Jane Morrison did an article, and she said, we're not probably looking at just retention rating, whether it's 61% or it's 84%. You actually have to look at the survey and what the lawyers are rating a judge low as, and you actually look at what areas of law that they're rating in. The top 3 questions on the survey is about, does a judge actually know the pleadings, know the findings, and know the facts? And then the next question is, are they making appropriate rulings based on the law and the facts? And are these rulings according to the law? And so you want to really look at what is a judge being rated low on, just not the percentage, but what are they being rated low on? And so I think if the RJ then compiled that data into some more, you got the additional data from the Supreme Court and from the courts, and actually did more articles about the specific judges, we would have a clearer picture. But I think their survey is just one tool to use combined with the other data that's out there.
Can I add a follow-up comment to what she said?
Sure.
The RJ, that additional information is available, but it's not. You have to go online to get it. It's not printed, as you well know. The RJ focuses on the $64,000 questions, and this does be retained. Rightly or wrong.
Bruce, you had mentioned something in one of your comments, and I'm just now completely blanking on what I wanted to follow up on, and that is so incredibly embarrassing. I had it right on the tip of my tongue, and then you followed up, and I forgot. Not blaming you at all.
You're pretty young to be having a senior moment.
Seriously, this is horrible. You think I've never done this before.
We'll come back to you.
That having been, yeah, I appreciate that. So I'm just going to go back to it. It will come to me at some point in time. But we are still going to stick with you.
Sure.
Yeah, you've been around the block more than once, as have all 3 of you. What do you see as the biggest source of inefficiency within the district court system? And assuming you're elected, how do you plan on addressing that?
Well, it's hard for me to say really what inefficiencies there are there, because let's face it, I'm not there in the trenches, and I think it's going to be, again, on a case-by-case basis, on a department-by-department basis. There's some judges that I like, some judges I'm lukewarm about, some judges I can't stand. I mean, I'll be honest with you. And so, I think you want a judge that's going to work hard, and then it's going to know the facts and know the law and going to make rulings and be prepared and be courteous to the litigants and, make the hard decisions and hopefully try to create a good record, because the last thing we need is more appeals to the Supreme Court. We need an intermediate appellate court, and just try to make a good record and just be prepared every day. Work hard, because you're a public servant, and I don't know about you. I work 6-7 days a week, and do the same thing if I'm a judge. You got to do whatever it takes to get a job. Job done. It's not a 9-to-5 job by any stretch of the imagination. It wasn't when I was a law clerk back in '87 to '88. It's not as long as I practice law, and it won't be if I'm a district court judge.
Susan, do you perceive any systemic inefficiencies that need to be addressed?
Well, I do. I think because when you go through the e-filing system and you get your court dates and you're calendared, if there was a way to allow the judicial departments to have a little bit more input on moving certain cases or stacking, so then they know if it's a long hearing that's going to take longer, it gets set on the right stack or the right calendar so the judge can accommodate it properly. A lot of times you'll go in, and because you do have a long hearing, you will get a new date and say, well, I'm going to have hearing on this and witnesses. We're going to just go in and get another date for you to come back in again in 2 weeks where I can hear this actual matter. If there was a way to shortcut that so you don't have to actually go into court to get that date, that would be a lot more efficient.
Okay. Ron.
Department 28, as you know, is a dedicated civil department. And the reason that they added 7 new judges 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, was to get rid of the civil backlog. The biggest way to get rid of civil cases is to settle them. And if you settle them, you save the taxpayers money. You save, you do that by less judges. You don't need to add more judges as the community grows because you're efficiently handling what you have. So the biggest way to resolve cases and settle them is to do what we do now, and that's do settlement conferences, but we need to have dedicated judges doing that. Right now, it's on a volunteer basis, and if you look at the statistics, again, that are out there, but they're not published, there are many judges who do not do settlement conferences, period. The civil judges are doing the bulk of them, and that makes sense because they are civil cases, but the other judges do have civil cases. They just don't have as high a percentage. If we have dedicated civil judges and we're disposing of cases, we're not taking bailiffs' time, we're not taking court clerks' time. These are all county employees, they get paid. The judges are, we won't need more judges as the town grows because we're getting rid of these backlog and including the current cases. If you settle it, it doesn't go to the Supreme Court. There's no appeals. Those are expensive. The $200 filing fee does not cover, it covers an hour's worth of hearing. And the fact that every case has a minimum of 10 hours hearing, it's the county that's paying again, and the state, but the county. So settling cases is the way to do it.
So are you advocating almost, I don't want to say mandatory requirements for judges to take X number of cases, or?
I'm suggesting rotating judges doing exclusively, like we have now. We need settlement judges. California's had it for 20 years. We need judges who are doing it. You can't do it for, say, more than a year, you burn out. But if you're doing settlements and that's all you're doing for a year or so, you're doing 5 a week. Now, with our staggered calendar, as much as, if I do 2 a week because I have the other calendars, I can't take more than 2. But if you were dedicated, say 3 or 4 judges, again on a rotating basis, doing that for an entire year, 5 days a week, that's 5 cases. That would probably triple the number of settlement conferences that currently take place. And by the way, a lot of people will do a settlement outside of the court system because it takes up to 90 days to get it. But if they do, and if they're faced with the private settlement judges and the fact that they charge $5,000 a day to do it, they're going to choose. They do choose through the court system, which is free. But again, that stacks up the settlement conferences that are possible. If you had, as I said, dedicated settlement judges, you could do more of them.
Okay, and Susan, you want, and we will get to you. Just kind of tacked on a question there. Susan, go ahead.
Well, a lot of the cases that you're already going through arbitrations, you're already going through the short trial program before you even get to the settlement conference. But I've done settlement conferences, in the district courts. And what it is though, it's assigned through, Jerry Weeks is the one that assigns the settlement conferences to the judges. So it's the judges need to be volunteering to do the settlement conferences. I think part of the issue is that a lot of the split criminal civil judges are taking the criminal trials on overflow, so they don't have that schedule to do the settlement judges. But I remember back in the day when Judge Earl would do settlement conferences with me at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. And so it's the judges being willing to stay later to accommodate the parties. Because a lot of the parties, attorneys, to get a settlement conference going, the clients are coming in, are working, or you're getting a large group of attorneys that you all need a specific time to meet, especially on the large complex cases. And a lot of times that's happening after hours.
Okay, and Bruce.
I'd like to respond to that question. I think there should be mandatory requirements of all the district court judges to do settlement conferences. Ron's idea as far as rotating would be great. But the chief judge, after hard counsel, Halverson versus hard counsel, has a lot of authority, and our 8 judicial district court rules were modified. The chief judge has a lot of authority. And let's face it, you know, there's some judges down there that are Clydesdales. I mean, they pull the plow, they work 80, 90 hours a week. They have good work ethics. And there's others that don't. And there's a great inequity in that. There's no reason why some of these judges shouldn't be working just as hard as the other judges. So if it takes mandatory amount of settlement judges or settlement conferences that the judges need to take, great. Let's dispose of the cases, like Ron said, saves everyone a lot of money.
Does anyone else have any questions? Because I've been talking for the last 2 hours straight. I'm happy to do it, but
I would just like to tell Ron how beautiful that name is. Because we
You like my last name?
no, it's your first name.
Oh.
That's just, I have names
Oh,
wrong.
okay. Well, I've had other people say Israel, and you know. Oh,
That's where I thought he was going with that.
That's a first name in
I love your name, Ron.
the Latin community.
Is it the first time you heard someone say, "I love your first name"?
No. All the Rons love it.
It's
We're
good.
Or I like your first name.
Oh, yeah, you have that in common. Elias,
Yes,
please.
sorry, sir. The only thing I like is suggestion, settlement. Better than going for a long time to cut down on time and cut down, and we'll have more time for everybody to settle other cases that need to be paid attention. So settlement is a key word, and if you have judges, like you said, mandatory on that, will be a plus point.
Ron?
Thank you, Ron, for making that suggestion.
You know, we've been, all three of you probably know, we've been doing these panel interviews for years, and that's the first time that particular area has been, or idea has been suggested. So, our next question, we'll start with, I guess, Susan, and rotate this way. Obviously, we heard earlier about people, I think this is what I wanted to talk about with Bruce, monetary donations being made to certain judges. How do you plan on trying to avoid the appearance of impropriety when there are going to be litigants in front of you who donated $5,000 or $2,000 to your campaign, whereas the opposing side did not? How do you plan on minimizing any impact that might have on your decisions or the performance of your duties, assuming you are elected?
I think you have to be careful from not taking from a certain group, whether it's one attorney or a law firm, a large sum of money, and knowing that that firm is backing you or their friends, because and that's where you get the impropriety. Luckily, in Nevada, all this information is public information, so the public or the opposing side can raise it if there's a concern, or you see a big concern of one group donating a substantial sum of money to one party. And so at this point, I think that you just have to be fair and impartial to everything that comes in front of you. And I am careful about who I take money from. There are certain groups, and I could tell you I turned down money from a certain party because I didn't want to be bought on the bench, and I didn't want to have someone behind me back like that. You got to run on your own you got to run on your own ethics, and you got to feel good about who you take money from, even now, and avoid any type of feeling obligated or pressured by anyone. And so that starts now. That starts today, as you know, as I'm out there campaigning.
Okay. Ron?
This time, well, I guess because last time I wasn't a sitting judge, I actually got a contribution from a litigant, which of course I had to send back. But the overall scheme of things, I have paid or contributed the most to my campaign by probably 100-fold compared to any other potential contributor. So as an Eagle Scout, I'm not going to be bought for a couple $1,000s when I've, over the years, put in a couple $100,000 to my own campaign. I think it's most important that I make the sacrifice because I wanted to be on the bench, and I certainly am not going to worry about somebody, even the maximum is $5,000. Their contributions are piddly compared to what I've put into this, which is public record, by the way.
Bruce.
Well, I'd have to agree with kind of what Ron said, and to some extent Susan said. You can look at my political campaign contribution expenses report, and historically, I have financed my own campaigns. I don't like asking people for money. It's very distasteful. People who are even not involved in the judicial system, you know, non-attorneys. You know, I tell people I'm running for judge. Sometimes they'll say, "Great, you got my vote. You got my support." I don't ask them for money. I don't like doing it. And so historically, I've spent my own money. I haven't spent near as much as Ron has. Maybe that's why he's won and I haven't before. And so our system stinks. It really does. And you read Juice versus Justice, and you know, you can be somewhat cynical about that. But again, it's public record. People can look at the financial campaign contribution expenses report of the judges. And a lot of times, you know, when you get involved in a case, the law is important and the facts are important, and you also, you know, I'll tell you, I look at who's opposing counsel, and I look at that judge's campaign contribution expense report and see if there was contributions to that judge. It's public record. It's not the best system. Sandra Day O'Connor was here in 2010, and she spoke about how, before she was on the Supreme Court of the United States, how she was instrumental in getting judges to vote for retention in Arizona, and how significantly less money is spent when judges run for retention versus run for election, and how much and how much time the judges are taken away from campaigning as opposed to performing their judicial functions. So unfortunately, this, I mean, with all due respect, we're here now because of that, and it's not a perfect system, and maybe it'll get on the ballot again, and it'll be changed, but it's our system.
We're coming up against our time limit here, so probably give about a minute or so to each of you for the last question, and you can kind of wrap things up thusly. I guess we'll start with Bruce and go back the other way. We've mentioned that it is it's an off-election cycle. You guys are not the top of the ticket, with all due respect. Judicial races never are. Bruce, how do you plan on getting your army to the polls come June 10th, I believe it is, and then subsequently in November, assuming you're successful in the primary?
Well, I don't know if I have really any control over getting armies to the polls and getting the voters to the polls. You know, let's face it, you know, there's statistics that can be obtained off the Clark County Election Department's website. You know, who are the inveterate voters, who consistently has voted in the last 3 or 4 primary elections, you know, presidential, non-presidential years, who are the inveterate voters in the general election, you know, for the last 3 or 4, and whether it be, you know, presidential or non-presidential races. So, I mean, there are certain, you know, target voters you can go after, but that doesn't necessarily bring them to the polls. So, some people, let's face it, are predisposed to vote, and some of them aren't. And some of them are very empathetic, some of them care about the political process. So I don't know if I can really control that.
Okay. Ron?
We do what we are doing here today. We go to organizations, we seek their endorsement, we discuss our credentials, our background, our experience, and we hope that they agree, certainly with, I think, all of us, that because these aren't popularity contests per se, as maybe you'd say a commissioner, that as a judge, experience counts. I would certainly suggest talking to other attorneys when it comes to selecting a judge, and we answer questions for people like you, and hope that we give you accurate and honest answers, and that you're persuaded to support us. And I will continue to do that through the primary, assuming I'm successful, all the way to the election.
Susan.
Well, you asked me to disclose my secrets to Ron Israel, who's sitting next to my opponent. I'm not sure if I want to do that, my campaign strategy. So Ron, close your ears and don't listen.
Earmuffs, Ron, earmuffs.
Are there any secrets left?
There are secrets left.
Okay.
But it's going to be a tough election. I mean, there's a ton of people on the ballot. There's a ton of candidates. And it's really going to be a ground game. By the ground game, what I mean is you need people out there who are working for you, getting your name out and voting and going to the ballot, and dedicated. And so that's what my campaign strategy is. I have the Central Labor Commission behind me, the unions out there who are working for me. I have people in the specific unions who have agreed to go out and campaign for me, not only their unions, but to get their friends, their neighbors to go out and vote for me. And so we're really running this as a ground game. I have people that's dedicated to place certain ads in certain papers for me, and we'll sponsor them and pay for them. One of them will be in the Asian community, a couple ads in their papers. So it's really getting my name out there, but not just getting my name out there, but getting specific groups to campaign for me, specific people to draw the voters out and support me. I've been out to a lot of events, and a lot of people really like me, and they're willing to do this for me. And that's how this election's going to move on.
Perfect. Well, right up at our time, we actually got the time correct.